Gravity Falls, a show of humor, mystery, and casual viewing. Unless you're me. My name is Christian. You're probably wondering why I'm dressed as Tipper Pines and about to rewatch the entire series. Rest assured, there's a perfectly logical explanation.
All right, now we move on to Northwest Mansion Mystery. And yeah, this is definitely another great episode. It's probably like one of my top favorite episodes, like not only of this season, but like of the series in general, just because like the tone and everything, definitely has like that kind of like spooky feel to it, like haunted house, murder mystery stories and everything. So I think the crew definitely did a good job at like portraying like the feelings that you get from those kinds of stories. But the basic premise is that the Northwest are pretty much having a party at Northwest Manor, to invite all the kind of like richest people in town. But just before the party's about to start, they realize that the mansion is actually haunted by several ghosts. So they try to enlist the help of someone who could ward off the spirits. And they realize that person is actually Dipper because they look in the newspaper article and they see Dipper battling a giant vampire bat. So not only does that show that Dipper is kind of like the go-to guy for confronting all these kind of paranormal creatures and everything like that, but it also shows that, since they took down the Society of the Blind Eye, everyone can see the magic now. And there's nothing really like stopping people from seeing like the weirdness that's going on in the town. So then Pacifica actually goes to Dipper and tries to convince him to come to the mansion to kind of ward off all the spirits and everything like that. But Dipper still wants nothing to do with her. But then, Mabel and Grenda and Candy find out about the party that's going on. And Dipper says like the only way that he'll help is if you invite not only him, but also Mabel, Candy, and Grenda. So Pacifica's kind of reluctant to it, but eventually gives them all the invitations. And then they finally all go to the party. And then we get introduced to a couple new characters. We get introduced to the character of Marius von Funhauser. And Marius is pretty much like a rich kid from the country of Austria who Mabel, Grenda, and Candy all kind of instantly have crushes over. One of the whole subplots is that Mabel and Candy are trying to prevent Grenda from kind of flirting with Marius because Grenda's kind of like this very like rough and tumble character, and like Marius is like, this kind of like posh upstart character and everything like that. So they kind of try to discourage her from flirting with him. But then, Grenda doesn't want to have anything to do with that. And then eventually, kind of says like, hey, what's that on her chest? And then kind of does the whole kind of like nose flip on him. And then Mabel and Candy are kind of like horrified by that. But then Marius actually ends up liking that and ends up like flirting with Grenda and like asking her for like her phone number and everything like that. So I think that was a fun twist there. We also get introduced to the character of Mare Hunter. Then on the flip side, you have Dipper trying to confront all the ghosts and everything, and then he eventually figures out that it's actually a category 10 ghost, and then he finds out that defeating a category 10 ghost is like trying to find a silver mirror and having the ghost kind of like get sucked into that. So he does that and traps the ghost, and then it seems like the day is saved. But then like halfway through, we realize that the ghost actually had a whole backstory, and that he was actually one of the lumberjacks who built up Northwest Manor, and that all he wanted was to be invited to the party, but then the Northwest betrayed them and decided to have the party without them. And then while the lumberjacks were outside during one of the storms, a mudslide came in and like killed off all the lumberjacks, and the ghost's kind of last dying declaration was that he's going to come back in 150 years and haunt the Northwest family. And then Nathaniel Northwest like heard this curse and like kind of wrote it down and kind of passed it down throughout the generations, so that now Preston knows that this is the time where the ghost is going to haunt them. So that was the whole reason why he hired Dipper to get rid of this curse and kind of like free them from it. And obviously that upsets Dipper. He confronts the Northwest about it and says like all you had to do was just invite all the people to the party and then this whole curse will be lifted. But the Northwest want nothing to do with that. So again, just says like enjoy the party because this is the last time you'll be invited to something like this. So Dipper actually leaves, and then before he's able to like exorcise the ghost, the ghost frees himself in the mirror and then haunts the mansion, brings a bunch of like taxidermies to life, starts turning people into wood, including Mabel, Candy, and Grenda. And so Dipper's trying to save them, so he goes in, but then he ends up turning into wood and kind of goes into that position that the shapeshifter kind of predicted back into the bunker. So now it's kind of like all up to Pacifica now. So she finally pulls the lever to kind of open the gates and let all the townspeople in. And then the ghost kind of sees this, and the curse is finally lifted. All the people are restored back to normal, and the townspeople kind of like semi-destroy the inside of the mansion as they're partying and everything like that. And Pacifica kind of gets over her control that her parents are putting her under. They have this little bell that they're trying to ring to get her to obey them, but then she wants nothing to do with that. So now she's kind of like finding free of that hold on her, and then goes into like the living room with Dipper, like the muddy shoes, and like stomps around and everything like that. And, now she's finally free to be like a normal kid. And we kind of get that last scene where Munkukit pulls Dipper aside and kind of warns him about the upcoming apocalypse. He has the laptop open. He sees that there's like a countdown happening and kind of like warns him that it's like, we need to prepare for these end times. But then Dipper kind of dismisses it and says like, oh, let's just enjoy the party and worry about that tomorrow. But Munkukit still has that kind of paranoia. We also see a little Easter egg of a tapestry in the background of people bowing down to Bill Cipher. And then we get like the end credit scene of Powers and Trigger kind of in disguise, talking about the anomalies strengthening and everything like that. So definitely kind of like setting up for the next episode, everything kind of comes to a head. And yeah, we'll see what happens with these characters moving forward.
We also get a couple of cryptograms. During the end credits of the episode, we get a cryptogram. And after using the Key Visionaire cipher, it translates to, next time on UTBAHC, did aliens write the Constitution? Crawdads and tiaras. M. Florida, the show. And the keyword is cursed, found on every other window on the top floor of the Northwest Mansion. Also on the page section at the end of the episode, we get two sequences of numbers. And after being put through the combined cipher, it translates to, Stan's not what he seems, Stan is not what he seems, Stan's not what he seems, which is definitely a hint of what's to come in the next episode.
So yeah, overall, great episode. Like definitely another like frightening episode, like kind of compared to Into the Bunker, like kind of disturbing images of, taxidermy animals, with their eyes and mouths bleeding and saying like ancient sins, and everything like that. So, and just like a good character growth moment for Pacifica. You finally see like a resolution to the whole butting of heads between Dipper and Pacifica. They finally kind of got over that and they're finally able to slowly but surely kind of become friends in a way and, not see each other as they think they are. So yeah, overall, yeah, great episode for sure.